All right, let's take just a moment to talk about David. We'll review just a little bit and then look at his city, David's city, discuss the Davidic covenant briefly, and then have a peek at the Tel Dan Stela. All right? David, review here. We are in 2 Samuel. David is anointed the king of Judah at Hebron. This is just following Saul's death, if you remember. Now, his son, Ishbosheth, or sometimes transcribed as Ishbaal, was also anointed, crowned king in Israel, right at the same time. This was by Abner. It is later, unfortunately for Ishbosheth, upon his death, that David is anointed once again at Hebron as king over Israel and Judah. So you see here, we actually have 3 anointings of David. The first is in Bethlehem by Samuel, in 1 Samuel. And then here, David is anointed twice, finally in chapter 5, as king over Israel and Judah. Both of these are at Hebron. Well, what did David do immediately? As king over Israel and Judah, he secured the borders of his kingdom quite successfully, and he captured Jerusalem, where the Jebusites were residing. Most scholars believe he did this through the water source. The translation relies a little bit on the Hebrew word Sinor and what exactly that means. David went through the Sinor. Many scholars believe that this in fact refers to water source, and if that's the case, David likely entered through the Gihon spring, which will come up as we speak about Hezekiah's tunnel next week in protecting that exterior water source that was so crucial for the city. So David captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites. There he built himself a palace. And there he centralized the cult in Jerusalem. He brought the ark. He brought Yahweh's presence to Jerusalem. And so Jerusalem became the spiritual and the political center. From here on out, by the way, even to this day, the spiritual and political center for Israel, for David's kingdom at this time. We are looking now at an aerial view of the old city of Jerusalem. So let me explain some of these markings. You see the perfect round red circle there. This I've circled to highlight what was, initially at least, David's city, even where we believe his palace was located. To give you perspective, let's look at this whole site. You see within the red rectangle, this is the Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount area. You can see outlining it the old Ottoman, or what are called now the old city walls. David's city was just outside of this Temple Mount area. Initially part of this nice round circle you see here, but then it extended through what is called this Spur of David, and this is the yellow highlighted area. You can see it is a raised spur that extends out from the Temple Mount, and this area, often referred to as the Ophel, is David's city. This is the city of David, and excavations are ongoing in this area, especially by Ami Mazar's niece, Eilat, and it's an exciting area to visit for sure. So note that David's city is just outside of what is considered the Temple Mount. Now let's get a little bit more perspective. Just to the right, you see this red wavy line. I've tried to highlight here what is the Kidron Valley. If you go up the Kidron Valley, where you see the arrow, you go up the Mount of Olives. This particular slope that looks very rocky is actually a cemetery. The cemeteries in Israel are completely rock, unlike what we think of here in the States. If you go around the corner through where this wavy line continues past David City or the Ophel, you run into the Hinnom Valley. Hinnom quite literally means hell. This is where we get the term Gehenna or Ge Hinnom. It is the valley of Hinnom. And so David City, you can see why its location was so key. It was surrounded by these valleys. It's a raised spur and had an amazing water source, the Gihon Spring, which we already mentioned. So this is David City. Moving up, this red rectangle that is the Temple Mount, this is where Solomon later extended his empire. And indeed, lying underneath the Dome of the Rock, we assume that the temple of Yahweh, that it lies there. And someday, perhaps we will know for sure. At the moment, there are no Solomonic temple remains, but this is where it certainly would have been located, and obviously to this day is perhaps the most contested location in the entire world. You see the little red star that I've marked here. It's where the red rectangle isn't complete, and I've tried to highlight there what is called the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall. It is the western wall of the Temple Mount, and to this day the closest that both Orthodox and conservative Reform Jews will go as far as proximity to where they believed the Solomonic temple lay. So the Western Wall is a pilgrimage site. It's a place to pray. Certainly one of the more holy sites for Judaism and for that matter Christians alike. I've had the privilege of going up on the Temple Mount, and the dome is quite lovely. And is certainly a unique experience. So I just wanted to show you this picture to give you an idea of where David City especially was located. I think sometimes we think that it was actually a part of the Temple Mount, and it was not. Yet the Solomonic temple extended and included all of the Ophel, or the spur, and through the Temple Mount area. Well, allow me to leave this slide up just for a moment, and I'd like to highlight, while you're looking at where David City is, the Davidic covenant, or the kingship covenant, that's found in 2 Samuel 7. So I'm going to read just a bit for you, beginning in verse 1. It says, "When the king was settled in his palace, and Yahweh had granted him safety from all the enemies around him, the king said to the prophet Nathan, 'Here I am, dwelling in a house of cedar, while the ark of Yahweh abides in a tent.' Nathan said to the king, 'Go, do whatever you have in mind, for Yahweh is with you.' But that same night the word of Yahweh came to Nathan, 'Go, say to my servant David, thus says Yahweh, are you the one to build a house for me to dwell in? From the day that I brought the people of Israel out of Egypt to this day, I have not dwelt in a house, but have moved about in tent and tabernacle. As I moved about wherever the Israelites went, did I ever reproach any of the tribal leaders whom I appointed to care for my people Israel? Why have you not built me a house of cedar? Further, say thus to my servant David, thus says Yahweh of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the flock, to be ruler of my people Israel. I've been with you wherever you went, have cut down all your enemies before you. Moreover, I will give you great renown like that of the greatest men on earth. I will establish a home for my people Israel, will plant them firm, so that they shall dwell secure and shall tremble no more. Evil men shall not oppress them any more as in the past, ever since I appointed chieftains over my people Israel. I will give you safety from all your enemies. Yahweh declares to you that He, Yahweh, will establish a house for you, David. When your days are done and you lie with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your own issue, and I will establish his kingship. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish his royal throne forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. When he does wrong, I will chastise him with the rod of men and the affliction of mortals. But I will never withdraw my favor from him as I withdrew it from Saul, whom I removed to make room for you. Your house, David, your kingship, shall ever be secure before you. Your throne shall be established forever. And I ended here in verse 16. I wanted to read this to you just to highlight this incredible play on words that happens. I know that you read just briefly in Richter's volume, Epic of Eden, about this, but I want to make it clear what happens in this incredible narrative. David has settled himself in this area that you see on the map, and he's built himself a palace. He desires that Yahweh also have a house. And through the prophet Nathan, we learn that rather Yahweh will build David a house, a forever house. The language in the Hebrew is just so sweet. This play on words regarding a house. Yahweh, I want to build you a house. No, David, I will build you a house, a forever house. This is the Davidic covenant. This is the kingship covenant. Well, let's have a look at the Tel Dan Stela. I know that you've already read about this a bit. The monumental inscription comes from Tel Dan up north, which we'll talk about even more next week as we get into the reign of Jeroboam. The inscription is in a dialect of Aramaic, and I've highlighted here what I believe is the important part of the inscription. Above the yellow highlight, rather, it says Beit David, and I've transcribed it here, B-Y-T-D-W-D, Beit David. And the inscription indeed makes reference to the house of David, and it's this incredible 9th century inscription that has brought such validity to the historical counts in the biblical narratives. The Tel Dan Stela rivals excitement with the Dead Sea Scrolls even. It is the earliest inscription that we have that is extra biblical that refers to David, and is currently held in the Israel Museum, so hopefully someday you'll be able to see this lovely piece.